The clock inside Gideon's mind counted down the final seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. The generator hiccuped, the lights flickered, and in that blessed window of darkness, his fingers found the rewired lock mechanism. 3 years of planning, 3 years of memorizing guard rotations and power cycles, 3 years of pretending to be broken while his mind stayed sharp as broken glass. The lock clicked. Freedom tasted like recycled air and desperation. Gideon moved through the ventilation shafts of the tomb like a ghost. That was what they called this place, the tomb, a fitting name for a prison floating in the void between stars where men were buried alive. His muscles screamed from disuse, but hatred fueled every movement. Hatred for General Bruce, who had taken everything from him. Hatred for the system that believed a corrupt officer over an honest pilot. Hatred that kept him alive through 1,000 nights of darkness. The hangar bay sprawled below him, filled with cargo haulers and maintenance craft. Gideon dropped from the vent, his bare feet silent on the cold metal floor. He moved between shadows, his body remembering the soldier he used to be before they made him prisoner number 7. The nearest hauler was old, scarred by too many planetary entries, but its engines hummed with dormant power. He slid into the pilot's seat, his hands dancing across controls he had not touched in 3 years, and the ship recognized him like an old friend. The engines roared to life. Alarms screamed throughout the tomb. Gideon's lips pulled back in something that might have been a smile, but felt more like a wound tearing open. The communication system crackled, and General Bruce's voice filled the cockpit, cold and precise. "You cannot escape, Gideon. There is nowhere in this galaxy you can hide from me. Stand down, and I will make your death quick." Gideon laughed, a sound rusty from disuse. He keyed the transmitter and spoke for the first time in 3 years, his voice rough but steady. "General, I want you to know something. Every night in that cell, I pictured your face when you realized I was still alive. That image kept me warm. That image kept me sane. Thank you for the motivation." Then he slammed the throttle forward, and the hauler punched through the hangar doors in a shower of sparks and screaming metal. Plasma cannons lit up the void. The hauler bucked and twisted as Gideon threw it into evasive patterns, his body moving on instinct. A blast caught the starboard engine, and alarms wailed, but he was already through, the tomb shrinking behind him, and ahead lay the infinite dark scattered with distant stars. He punched coordinates at random. Anywhere, everywhere, as long as it was away. The hyperdrive engaged with a sound like reality tearing, and space folded around him. But damaged systems and desperate jumps make poor companions. The hauler shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, its navigation computer screaming warnings. Ahead loomed a planet, uncharted in green and utterly unexpected. Gideon fought the controls, but the ship was dying around him. Atmosphere caught the hull, and everything became fire and noise. He saw 2 suns burning in an alien sky, violet forests spreading below, and then the ground rushed up with terrible finality. The impact turned the world into a kaleidoscope of pain. Metal screamed and crumpled. Gideon's restraints cut into his chest, but they held barely. The hauler skidded through rust-colored grass, plowing a furrow 100 meters long before finally coming to rest against a boulder. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of escaping coolant and the creak of tortured metal. Gideon's fingers fumbled with the restraints. Blood ran into his eyes from a gash on his forehead. His ribs felt cracked. His left arm refused to move properly, but he was alive. He was alive and free, and that thought sent him crawling through the shattered cockpit window onto alien soil. The grass beneath his hands felt wrong, too coarse, too red, and it smelled of copper and rain. He collapsed onto his back, staring up at twin suns that turned the sky shades of orange and gold he had never seen before. Then he started laughing. He laughed at the absurdity of it all, laughed at surviving 3 years in the tomb only to die on an unknown world. Laughed because laughter was all he had left. The laughter died in his throat when the grass began to move. It came from the violet forest like a shadow given form. Gideon's survival instincts, honed by 3 years of constant vigilance, screamed at him to run, but his broken body would not respond. The creature that emerged from the high grass made him forget his pain. It stood as tall as a cargo hauler, its body covered in midnight black fur that seemed to absorb light. Its head was broad and wolf-like, but proportions were all wrong. Too large, too powerful, and its eyes burned with amber fire the size of dinner plates. Each paw was as wide as Gideon's chest, tipped with claws that gleamed like black glass. This was Doni, though Gideon did not know his name yet. He knew only that death approached on 4 massive legs, each footfall making the ground tremble. The creature's lips pulled back, revealing fangs as long as knives. Its breath washed over Gideon, hot and rank with the smell of meat and blood. Gideon stared into those amber eyes and saw his reflection, small and broken and insignificant. He did not close his eyes. If death was coming, he would meet it watching, the same way he had met every morning in the tomb. The creature lowered its massive head, its jaws opening wide enough to swallow him whole. Gideon tensed, ready for the end. A blue blur crashed between them. She could not have been more than 8 years old, this tiny creature with skin the color of a summer sky and hair that fell in wild tangles of shocking pink. She planted herself directly in front of the monster's jaws, her small fists on her hips, and her voice rang out high and furious. "Bad Doni! Bad boy! You do not eat strangers without permission. How many times must I tell you?" The massive predator stopped, its ears, each one larger than the child, folded back. It sat, still enormous, still terrifying, but now looking for all the world like a scolded puppy. The little girl reached up, grabbed one of its huge ears, and tugged. Doni lowered his head to her level, and she tapped him firmly on the nose. "No eating, understand?" Gideon lay on the rust-colored grass, his mind struggling to process what his eyes showed him. The child turned to him, her head tilting with curiosity. Her eyes were gold, just like the monster's, but hers held intelligence and wonder where Doni's held only hunger. She stepped closer, examining Gideon the way a scientist might examine a particularly interesting specimen. "You are very strange looking," she announced. "Your eyes are wrong. They should be gold or amber, not that muddy brown. And your skin, it is the wrong color. Are you broken?" She poked his ribs and he winced. "Yes, broken. That is not good." Gideon found his voice, though it came out as a croak. "The monster. Your monster." "Doni?" The girl glanced back at the creature. "He is not a monster. He is my puppy." She turned those golden eyes back to Gideon, and her expression shifted to puzzlement. "My puppy does not eat you." "Strange. He eats everyone. He ate 3 hunters last month. Well, he ate 2. One escaped, but Doni got his leg. Are you poisonous? Is that why he will not eat you?" "No," Gideon managed. "Not poisonous. Just lucky, apparently." The girl nodded as if this made perfect sense. She grabbed his hand with surprising strength. "Come. You need fixing. Mother is good at fixing broken things." She pulled, and Gideon had no choice but to stumble to his feet. Behind them, Doni rose and followed, each step shaking the ground. Gideon glanced back at the beast, noting how its amber eyes never left him, how its nose worked constantly, analyzing his scent. "What is your name?" the girl asked as she led him toward the forest. "Gideon. And yours?" "Elisina. But everyone calls me Eli." She paused, looking up at him. "You are the first not blue person I have ever seen. Did you fall from the sky?" "I saw fire falling. Was that you?" "Yes," Gideon admitted. "My ship crashed." Elisina's eyes went wide with excitement. "You have a flying ship. Can it fly again? Can you teach me to fly?" "Mother says I am too young, but I am very smart. I can count to 300. I can read. I know all the stars. Can you teach me?" "Maybe," Gideon said, his head spinning from pain and surreal conversation. "If we can fix the ship." They entered the violet forest, and Gideon's breath caught despite his injuries. The trees rose like cathedral pillars, their bark a deep purple that seemed to glow in the light of the twin suns. Vines hung between them, covered in flowers that pulsed with bioluminescence, even in daylight. Strange birds called from the canopy, their songs like nothing from earth. The air tasted of spice and growing things. Elisina chattered continuously as they walked, asking questions faster than Gideon could answer. Why was his hair yellow when proper hair should be pink or blue or purple? Did he have two hearts like proper people or just one? Could he see in the dark? Could he smell fear? Could he run very fast? Could he fight? I used to be able to fight, Gideon said, before they locked me away. Who locked you away? Elisina demanded, her young voice sharp with outrage. Bad people, Gideon said simply. People who did not like that I told the truth. Then they are stupid, Elisina declared with the absolute certainty of childhood. Mother says people who do not like truth are cowards. Are they cowards? Yes, Gideon said, thinking of General Bruce. They are cowards. Good. Then we do not like them either. Elisina squeezed his hand. You can stay with us. Doni likes you, and Doni never likes anyone except me. Voris are very good judges of character. That is what Mother says. If Doni does not eat you, it means you are good inside. Voris? Gideon looked back at the massive creature padding behind them. That is what we call his kind. Vorak in the old language. But that is hard to say. Voris is easier. Elisina scratched Doni's nose as they walked, and the massive beast rumbled with contentment. He found me when I was very small. I was lost in the forest, and he could have eaten me, but he did not. He carried me home in his mouth, very gentle. Mother said it was impossible, that Voris do not do such things, but Doni did. So now he is mine, and I am his, and we are family. The forest opened onto a valley, and Gideon stopped, his breath catching for a different reason now. The village spread below them, built of dark stone with curved roofs that caught the light of the twin suns. Streets of black slate wound between buildings, and in the center rose a structure larger than the rest, its walls carved with symbols he could not read. Smoke rose from chimneys, carrying the scent of cooking meat and spices. It looked like something from a dream, beautiful and alien and impossibly distant from the cold metal of the tomb. That is home, Elisina said proudly. Come, everyone will want to see you. They descended into the village, and Gideon felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. The villagers were all like Elisina, their skin various shades of blue from pale sky to deep sapphire, their hair in shades of pink and purple. They dressed in leather and woven cloth, and they carried weapons of wood and stone and sharpened metal. They stopped their work to stare at the strange procession. A tiny blue girl leading a broken man of wrong colors, followed by a Vora that should have killed them both. Whispers followed them through the streets. Gideon heard words in a language he did not understand, but their tone was clear enough. Suspicion, fear, wonder. Hands moved toward weapons. Elisina seemed oblivious, skipping along and waving at people she knew. Then Doni growled, a sound so deep it vibrated in Gideon's chest, and the villagers fell back. Weapons lowered. The crowd parted. They think Doni is going to eat them, Elisina explained cheerfully. He does eat people sometimes, but only bad people. Well, mostly bad people. Sometimes he eats people who are not bad but smell like food. But he has not eaten anyone in 3 months, so he is being very good. That is reassuring, Gideon muttered. They arrived at the largest building, the one from the center of the village. Elisina did not knock. She simply threw open the doors and called out, Mother, I found something amazing. Come see. Footsteps sounded from the interior, and a woman emerged from the shadows. Gideon's breath stopped in his throat. She was tall, nearly his height, with skin of deep sapphire blue and hair that cascaded down her back in shades of pink sunset. Her eyes were gold, sharp and assessing, and when they fixed on Gideon, he felt like prey again, but in a different way. She wore leather hunting gear that showed the hard muscle beneath, and at her hip hung a knife with a blade of black glass. Elisina, the woman said, her voice low and musical. What have you brought home now? A person, Mother? Elisina bounced with excitement. He fell from the sky. His ship crashed. Doni found him but did not eat him, which is very strange because Doni eats everyone. But he did not eat this one, so I think we should keep him. Can we keep him? Please? The woman's eyes never left Gideon. She moved closer, circling him like a hunter examining wounded prey. Her gaze took in his injuries, his prison clothes, the desperation that clung to him like a second skin. We do not keep people, Elisina. People are not pets. But Doni chose him, Elisina insisted. Voras do not make mistakes about people. You said so yourself. The woman stopped in front of Gideon. Her golden eyes bored into his. What is your name, Skyfaller? Gideon. He met her gaze, refusing to look away. Gideon, the fugitive. Gideon, the prisoner. Gideon, the pilot, who made powerful men angry. A hint of something that might have been respect flickered in those golden eyes. I am Chloe. This is my daughter, though I suspect you have already discovered that. She glanced at the massive Vora sitting patiently behind them. And I see you have also met Doni, which means you are either very brave or very lucky. Which is it? Lucky, Gideon admitted. Always lucky. Never brave. Chloe's lips quirked, almost a smile. Honest at least. That is rare. She looked at his injuries again. Come inside. You are bleeding on my doorstep, and that attracts scavengers. Elisina, fetch water and clean cloth. Move. Elisina scampered away. Chloe led Gideon into the house, and Doni tried to follow, but the woman pointed firmly at the ground outside. You stay. You are too large for inside. Doni huffed but obeyed, settling his massive bulk across the threshold like a living wall. The interior of the house was simple but comfortable. Furs covered the floors and weapons hung on the walls alongside dried herbs and mysterious tools. Chloe pushed Gideon into a chair and began examining his wounds with practiced efficiency. Her hands were gentle despite her warrior's calluses. She cleaned the cut on his forehead, pressed his ribs to check for breaks, manipulated his injured arm until he gasped. 3 cracked ribs, she announced. Nothing broken, but you will hurt for weeks. The arm is sprained, not torn. The head wound will scar but not kill you. She met his eyes. You are fortunate. A weaker man would have died in that crash. I have practiced surviving, Gideon said. Chloe tilted her head, studying him. Yes, I can see that. You watch the door too much. You measure distances to exits. You expect attack. She bound his ribs with strips of cloth, her movements sure and efficient. What did they do to you, Gideon the Skyfaller? Locked me in a box for 3 years, Gideon said flatly. Told me I would die there. Told me I was nothing, but they were wrong. Elisina returned with water and cloth, and Chloe cleaned Gideon's wounds while her daughter watched with rapt attention. The little girl asked questions about human anatomy that made Gideon laugh despite the pain. Why did he only have 2 eyes instead of 3? Why was his blood red instead of blue? Why did he smell so strange? Chloe answered patiently, explaining that different people from different worlds were made in different ways, and that differences were not wrong, merely different. Tell me your story, Chloe said as she worked. Tell me what brought you to Vela 7. So Gideon told them. He spoke of being a pilot for the Earth Federation, of discovering that General Bruce was selling weapons to hostile forces, of trying to expose the corruption. He spoke of the trial that was a sham, the evidence that disappeared, the witnesses who recanted or vanished. He spoke of the tomb, of 3 years in a cell barely large enough to lie down, of the darkness and the hunger, and the slow grinding of hope into dust. He spoke of planning his escape, of the 4-second window, of stealing the hauler, and running as far and fast as he could. And now you are here, Chloe said when he finished, on a world you do not know, among people you do not understand, with enemies who will not stop searching for you. Yes, Gideon said. I am aware of my situation. Elisina grabbed his hand. It is not fair, she declared. You were trying to do good, and they punished you. That is not how things should work. Life is not fair, little one, Chloe said gently. Life is hard and often cruel. But her golden eyes softened as she looked at Gideon. However, my daughter is correct about one thing. Doni chose you, and Voras do not make mistakes about people. They see what is hidden, what is true. If Doni allowed you to live, it is because he saw something worth keeping alive. So I can keep him? Elisina asked hopefully. He is not a pet, Chloe repeated, but there was amusement in her voice now. However, he may stay. For now. She stood, towering over Gideon. Rest tonight. Tomorrow I will teach you to survive in this world. If you cannot hunt, you cannot eat. If you cannot fight, you will die. This is not a gentle place, and we do not coddle the weak. I am not weak, Gideon said. Chloe smiled, and it was a hunter's smile. We will see. That night, Gideon lay on furs in a small room, his body aching but clean and bandaged. Through the window, he could see 3 moons rising over Vela 7, painting the landscape in shades of silver and blue. He heard Elisina singing in another room, a lullaby in the alien language that still sounded beautiful. He heard Chloe moving about, checking weapons and preparing for the next day. He heard Doni outside, the massive Vora breathing slow and steady as he guarded the house. For the first time in 3 years, Gideon felt safe. It was a fragile feeling, easily broken, but it was real. He closed his eyes and slept without nightmares. Dawn came with Chloe's hand, shaking him awake. Move, she said. Training begins now. Gideon stumbled outside to find the village already awake. Hunters prepared their weapons and checked their gear. Children played in the streets under watchful eyes. Elisina sat with Doni, feeding the massive Vora chunks of raw meat that the beast swallowed with delicate precision, despite his fearsome jaws. Chloe handed Gideon a spear. It was longer than he was tall, the shaft made of dark wood and the point of sharpened stone. Learn this, she said. Your life depends on it. I am a pilot, Gideon protested. I fly ships. I do not hunt with spears. Then you will die, Chloe said simply. There are no ships here. There is only the forest, and the forest will kill you if you do not learn to kill it first. Now stance. She showed him how to hold the spear, how to plant his feet, how to shift his weight. It looked simple when she did it, fluid and natural as breathing. When Gideon tried, he was clumsy and unbalanced. The spear felt wrong in his hands, too heavy in the front, too light in the back. He thrust at the target, a straw dummy, and missed by a hand's width. Again, Chloe said. He tried again, and again, and again. Each time Chloe corrected his grip, his stance, his movement. Each time he failed. Sweat poured down his face despite the cool morning air. His cracked ribs screamed with every movement. His sprained arm throbbed. You are fighting yourself, Chloe observed. You think too much. Your mind gets in the way of your body. Stop thinking. Feel. I do not understand, Gideon panted. You will, Chloe said, or you will die. There is no third option here. They trained through the morning. When Gideon could barely lift the spear, Chloe gave him a knife and taught him how to gut and clean the small animals that the village children brought in from their traps. When his hands shook too badly for that, she taught him to identify which plants were safe to eat and which would kill him in hours. When he could no longer focus, she finally allowed him to rest. Elisina brought him water and sat beside him on the grass. Doni lay nearby, his massive head on his paws, watching with those unsettling amber eyes. You are very bad at this, Elisina said with the blunt honesty of children. I know, Gideon admitted, but you keep trying. That is good. She handed him a piece of dried meat. You fall because you are afraid. Afraid of what? Gideon asked. Afraid of falling. Elisina said it as if it were obvious. When you are afraid of falling, your body tries not to fall, and so it cannot move properly. When you stop being afraid of falling, your feet will know what to do by themselves. She smiled. That is what Mother taught me. How old are you? Gideon asked. 8 years and 4 months and 6 days, Elisina recited proudly. I have seen 8 full cycles of the seasons. Mother says I am very mature for my age. You are very wise for your age, Gideon said, and he meant it. I know, Elisina said without false modesty. I am special. Not everyone can be friends with a Vora. Not everyone can talk to sky people. I am collecting special things. Over the following days, Elisina appointed herself as Gideon's guide to the village. She showed him the market, a sprawling collection of stalls where villagers traded goods and gossip. She introduced him to the tanners, the weavers, the blacksmiths who worked metal with techniques Gideon did not recognize. She showed him the training grounds where young hunters learned their craft, and the shrines where villagers left offerings to spirits Gideon did not understand. The villagers watched him with suspicion, but Elisina's presence seemed to grant him a measure of protection. That and Doni, who followed them everywhere. The massive Vora's presence ensured that no one challenged Gideon directly, though he heard whispers in the alien language that made Elisina scowl. They do not trust you, she explained. They think you will bring trouble. Mother told the council that you could stay, but many of them disagreed. They think outsiders are dangerous. They are not wrong, Gideon said. I am dangerous, just not to them. That is what I told them, Elisina said. But some people do not listen. One afternoon, Elisina led Gideon to a particular stall in the market. The merchant was unusual, possessing 3 heads that spoke in harmony, each voice slightly out of sync with the others. He sold exotic spices and rare herbs, and his stall was draped in colorful cloth. That is Makru, Elisina whispered. He is very mean. He once told me I was too young to understand commerce, and he would not sell me the spices I wanted. She produced a slingshot from her pocket, a simple weapon of wood and twisted cord. So I am going to teach him a lesson about underestimating people. Elisina, no, Gideon started, but the girl was already loading a small stone into the sling. She took aim with the casual precision of long practice and let fly. The stone whistled through the air and struck the central head squarely on the nose. All 3 heads shrieked in harmony, and the merchant lunged forward, knocking over jars of spices. Elisina grabbed Gideon's hand and ran, pulling him through the market as angry shouts followed them. They fled through winding streets, Elisina laughing with wild abandon, and despite everything, Gideon found himself laughing too. It was absurd running through an alien marketplace because a child had pelted a 3-headed merchant with rocks, but it was also liberating. For the first time in years, he felt young, felt alive, felt like something other than prisoner number 7. They collapsed in an alley, gasping for breath, and Elisina grinned up at him. That was fun, she declared. We should do it again sometime. We absolutely should not, Gideon said, but he was smiling. That evening, they sat on the porch of Chloe's house, watching the twin suns set. The sky turned shades of red and gold and purple that Earth never knew. Elisina leaned against Gideon's side and Doni lay at their feet, his massive body generating heat like a furnace. Gideon, Elisina said quietly, are the bad people who locked you away going to come looking for you? Gideon hesitated. He did not want to lie to her, but he also did not want to frighten her. Probably, he admitted, General Bruce does not leave loose ends. He will search for me. Elisina was quiet for a moment. Then we will not let him hurt you, she said with absolute conviction. You are ours now. We are your family. Families protect each other. Gideon felt something crack in his chest, something that had been frozen for 3 years. He looked down at this small blue girl with pink hair and golden eyes, this child who had claimed him as family with the casual certainty that only children possess, and he realized she meant every word. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. You do not need to thank family, Elisina said. You just need to stay. She looked up at him, her eyes serious. You will stay, right? You will not leave? I will stay, Gideon promised. As long as I can, I will stay. Good, Elisina said, and she curled closer against his side. Because I like you. You smell strange and you fall down a lot when you train. But you are kind. Doni thinks so too. She scratched the massive Vora's ear, and the beast rumbled with contentment. Voras know about these things. The next morning, Gideon found Elisina sitting by the stream that ran through the village. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, and tears left tracks on her blue cheeks. He sat beside her, careful not to crowd her, and waited. The other children say I am strange, she finally said. They say it is not normal to have a Vora. They say it is not normal that I do not have a father. They say I am wrong. Gideon chose his words carefully. Being strange is not the same as being wrong, he said. I think being strange just means being special in ways that other people do not understand yet. But I do not want to be special, Elisina whispered. I just want to be normal. Normal is boring, Gideon said. You tamed a creature that everyone else fears. You saved a man who fell from the sky. You can hit a target with a slingshot from 50 paces. How many normal people can do those things? None, Elisina admitted. Exactly. So being strange is actually being extraordinary. And extraordinary people change the world. He bumped her shoulder gently with his. Besides, I am strange too. I am the wrong color. I have the wrong eyes. I fall from the sky and barely know how to use a spear. But you do not think I am wrong, do you? No, Elisina said. You are perfect the way you are. Then maybe you are perfect the way you are too, Gideon suggested. Elisina was quiet for a long moment. Then she threw her arms around him, hugging him fiercely. Promise you will never leave, she said. Promise. I promise, Gideon said. And he meant it with every fiber of his being. Days turned into weeks. Gideon's body slowly adapted to the demands Chloe placed upon it. He learned to move with the spear, learned to anticipate the weight and balance, learned to strike with precision. He learned to track animals through the violet forest, to read signs in broken branches and disturbed earth. He learned the names of plants and which ones would heal and which ones would harm. He learned the language of the blue-skinned people, though he spoke it with a heavy accent that made Elisina giggle. Chloe watched his progress with inscrutable golden eyes. She praised him rarely, criticized him often, and pushed him harder than he thought possible. But sometimes when she thought he was not looking, he caught her watching him with something that might have been approval or respect, or perhaps something more complicated. One evening, after a particularly brutal training session, Chloe brought him a cup of tea made from herbs he could not identify. She sat across from him, her expression thoughtful. Tomorrow the council will test you, she said. They will decide if you can stay or if you must leave. What kind of test? Gideon asked. A hunt, Chloe said. You must go into the deep forest alone and bring back meat. If you succeed, they will accept you as one of us. If you fail, they will drive you from the village. She met his eyes. I cannot help you. No one can. This is your trial alone. I understand, Gideon said. Chloe was quiet for a moment. My husband died in the deep forest, she said suddenly. A pack of serpents caught him. He killed 3 before they tore him apart. Elisina was only 4 years old. She does not remember him well. She paused. I closed my heart after that. I decided it was safer not to care, not to let anyone in. But then you fell from the sky, and my daughter claimed you as family, and Doni accepted you, and I find myself caring despite my intentions. Why are you telling me this? Gideon asked. Because I want you to know, Chloe said, what you are returning to. If you come back, she stood, and for a moment she looked uncertain, vulnerable in a way he had never seen before. My daughter calls you by your name. In our culture, names have power. To speak someone's name is to let them into your soul. I have not spoken anyone's name in 4 years. She met his eyes. Gideon, come back alive. It was not a request. It was a command, delivered with the authority of a hunter who had never learned to beg. Gideon nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in his throat. Chloe left without another word, and he sat alone with his tea and his thoughts. Before dawn, Elisina crept into his room. She pressed something into his hand, a small stone, painted with careful patterns in shades of blue and pink and gold. It is magic, she whispered. I believe it is magic, so it is magic. It will keep you safe. Gideon closed his fingers around the stone. Thank you, he said. You have to come back, Elisina said, and her golden eyes were bright with unshed tears. You promised. I promised, Gideon agreed, and I keep my promises. He left the village as the first sun breached the horizon. The council watched in silence, their faces unreadable. Chloe stood with her arms crossed, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes tracked him until he disappeared into the violet forest. Elisina held Doni's ear, restraining the massive Vora who wanted to follow. Be good, Doni, she commanded. Let him prove himself. The deep forest was different from the edges Gideon had explored during training. Here the trees grew closer together, their purple bark covered in luminescent moss. The canopy blocked most of the sunlight, leaving the forest floor in perpetual twilight. Strange sounds echoed through the gloom, howls and screeches and sounds he could not identify. Every shadow could hide a predator. Every rustle of leaves could signal an attack. Gideon moved carefully, his spear held ready, his senses straining. He had until sunset to kill something and bring it back. Failure meant exile, and exile on Vela 7 meant death. The forest did not forgive the weak or the foolish. He found tracks after an hour, 4-legged prints in the soft earth, each one the size of his hand. Something large, something heavy. He followed the trail deeper into the forest, his heart pounding. The tracks led to a clearing where the vegetation had been torn and trampled. Fresh blood stained the grass, and the air reeked of musk and decay. Then he saw it. The serpent was coiled among the roots of a massive tree, its 6 legs folded beneath its serpentine body. It was easily 4 meters long, covered in scales that shifted color to match the surroundings. Its head was wedge-shaped, and when it opened its jaws, he saw rows of needle teeth designed to grip and tear. This was what had killed Chloen's husband. This was the apex predator of the deep forest. The serpent saw him, its eyes, multiple pairs arranged along its skull, fixed on Gideon with cold intelligence. It uncoiled slowly, tasting the air with a forked tongue the length of Gideon's arm. Then it struck, faster than thought, its body unfolding like a spring released. Gideon dove aside, his training overriding his terror. The serpent's jaws snapped shut where he had been standing, so close he felt the wind of its passage. He rolled, came up with his spear ready, but the creature was already repositioning, its multiple legs carrying it in a circle, cutting off his escape. They circled each other in the clearing, predator and prey, though Gideon was not sure which was which. The serpent feinted left, and Gideon pivoted, keeping the spear point between them. His mind raced. The creature was faster, stronger, better adapted to this environment. In a straight fight, he would lose. So he stopped fighting. He stopped thinking. He let his body move the way Chloen had taught him, the way Elisina had described, without fear, without hesitation, letting his feet know what to do by themselves. When the serpent struck again, he was already moving, flowing aside like water, and his spear flicked out, opening a shallow cut along the creature's flank. The serpent hissed, a sound like steam escaping, and blood that smelled of copper and poison dripped from the wound. It was not a killing blow, but it was first blood, and Gideon felt a savage satisfaction. The creature's camouflage flickered, showing its true colors, mottled green and brown scales over lean muscle. They circled again, and this time the serpent was cautious, respecting the weapon in Gideon's hands. It feinted right, then left, testing his reactions. Gideon held his ground, conserving energy, waiting for the opening. The creature's multiple eyes never blinked, never looked away, and Gideon saw the intelligence there, saw it learning, adapting. The serpent lunged again, but this time it was a full commitment, all 6 legs driving it forward in a rush of scales and fury. Gideon planted his spear in the ground, braced it against his foot the way Chloen had shown him, and let momentum do the work. The serpent impaled itself on the stone point, its own charge driving the weapon deep into its chest. But it was not dead. The creature thrashed, its jaws snapping, its legs clawing at the earth and at Gideon. Claws raked across his arm, drawing blood. Teeth grazed his shoulder. He held on to the spear shaft, refusing to let go, putting his weight behind it, driving it deeper. The serpent's movements grew weaker, more erratic. Black blood poured from its mouth, its eyes, all of them, fixed on Gideon with what might have been hatred or respect or simply recognition of another killer. Then it died. The body went limp, the eyes glazed, and silence fell over the clearing. Gideon stood over his kill, gasping for breath, his arms trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. Blood covered him, some his, most the serpent's. His spear was embedded so deep in the creature's body that extracting it took all his remaining strength. He heard a sound behind him and spun, spear raised, ready for another attack. But it was Doni who emerged from the trees. The massive Vora limped, one of his legs dragging, and blood matted his black fur. Gideon understood in an instant. Doni had followed him. Doni had fought something else in the forest to protect him. Doni had been injured. The Vora approached slowly, favoring his wounded leg. He sniffed the dead serpent, then looked at Gideon with those amber eyes. There was approval there, and something else, something that looked like kinship. Gideon reached out carefully and placed his hand on the massive beast's head. Doni's fur was surprisingly soft beneath the blood and dirt. "Thank you," Gideon said. "I could not have done this without you." Doni rumbled, a sound that vibrated through Gideon's chest, and for the first time Gideon understood why Elisina loved this creature. Beneath the terror and the killing power was loyalty absolute, devotion unquestioning. Doni had chosen them, and he would protect them until death. Together they began the long journey back to the village. Gideon dragged the serpent's carcass, refusing to leave his prize. Doni limped beside him, never complaining, never stopping. The twin suns moved across the sky, marking the passage of hours. Gideon's strength faded, but he pushed on, driven by Elisina's painted stone in his pocket and Chloen's command to return alive. The suns touched the horizon when they finally emerged from the forest. The village gates stood open, and what seemed like the entire population had gathered to watch. Gideon saw Chloen standing at the front, her face carefully neutral, but her hands were clenched at her sides. Beside her, Elisina strained against the grip of an elder who held her back. Gideon dragged the serpent's body through the gates and dropped it at the council's feet. He stood before them, covered in blood and dirt, exhausted beyond measure, but still standing. Behind him, Doni collapsed, too tired to go further. The crowd erupted. Cheers and shouts filled the air. Elisina tore free from her restraint and launched herself at Gideon, nearly knocking him over. She clung to him, crying and laughing at the same time. "You did it! You kept your promise! You came back!" Chloen approached more slowly. She examined the serpent's body, noted the precision of the killing blow, and then looked at Gideon. Her golden eyes held emotions he could not name. Without a word, without hesitation, she grabbed the front of his shirt and pulled him down to her level. She kissed him, hard and fierce, in front of the entire village. It was not a gentle kiss or a tentative one. It was a claim, a declaration, a promise of things unspoken. When she pulled back, her voice was steady, but her eyes were bright. "You returned," she said. "You kept the name I spoke." "I keep my promises," Gideon said, echoing Elisina's words. "Then you are one of us now," Chloen declared, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The council may judge, but I claim him. He is mine, and I am his. And anyone who disputes this can face me in the challenge circle." No one spoke against her. No one dared. The months that followed were the closest to happiness Gideon had ever known. He learned to hunt with the other warriors, his skills growing under Chloen's relentless instruction. He learned to fight, not with modern weapons, but with spear and knife and bow. He learned the stories of the village, the history of the blue-skinned people, the legends of Vela 7. Elisina appointed herself his language tutor, correcting his grammar with cheerful ruthlessness until he spoke the alien tongue with only a slight accent. At night, he lay beside Chloen, her head on his chest, and they spoke of small things and large. She told him of her fears for Elisina, growing up in a world that did not always understand different. He told her of Earth, of cities that reached for the sky, of ships that sailed between stars. They built something together, something fragile and precious. And Gideon allowed himself to believe it might last. Elisina grew taller, more confident. She hunted with Doni at her side, bringing down game that seasoned warriors respected. She still asked endless questions and shot her slingshot at targets that deserved it, and sometimes at targets that probably did not. She called Gideon by his name and called him family, and he responded to both with equal devotion. But the past is not easily escaped. 6 months after Gideon's arrival on Vela 7, the sky above the village split with the roar of descending ships. They came at dawn, 3 Federation cruisers that hung in the air like metal predators. The village scrambled to arms, confusion and fear spreading like wildfire. Gideon stood in the village square, his heart sinking as he recognized the insignia on the lead ship's hull. General Bruce had found him. The ships landed beyond the village walls, their bulk crushing the violet grass. Ramps descended and soldiers marched out. 50 armed troops in Federation armor, carrying weapons that could level the village in minutes. At their head walked General Bruce himself, his uniform immaculate, his face carved from ice. He was older than Gideon remembered, gray threading his hair, but his eyes held the same cold calculation. Villagers gathered, weapons in hand but facing an enemy they did not understand. Chloen stood at the front, her hunting knife drawn, and beside her stood a line of the village's best warriors. Elisina clutched Doni's fur, restraining the massive Vora, who growled with a sound that made the ground tremble. General Bruce surveyed the village with barely disguised contempt. He spoke through a translator device that turned his words into the alien language. I am General Marcus Bruce of the Earth Federation. I am here for a fugitive, a traitor who escaped custody. His name is Gideon Anders. Surrender him to me, and we will leave in peace. Resist, and I will level this primitive settlement and everyone in it. Silence fell over the village. Every eye turned to Gideon. He stepped forward, his hands open, his expression calm despite the terror gnawing at his guts. He spoke in English, the first time he had used his native language in months. Hello, General. Still murdering people who inconvenience you? Bruce's eyes narrowed. Anders, you have led us on quite a chase. Did you really think you could hide on this backwater world forever? I did not think about forever, Gideon said. I thought about today, about tomorrow, about living free instead of dying in your prison. You exposed classified information, Bruce said. You betrayed the Federation. You deserve execution. I exposed your crimes, Gideon corrected. I showed the galaxy what you are. A man who sells weapons to terrorists for profit. A man who kills anyone who threatens his power. I deserve a medal, not execution. You will get neither, Bruce said coldly. You will get a quick death if you surrender now. Make me come and take you, and I will burn this village and everyone in it. These aliens mean nothing to the Federation. They are primitives, barely sentient. Their lives are worth less than fuel. Something changed in the village then. The warriors might not have understood English, but they understood threat. They understood the tone of Bruce's voice, the casual dismissal of their existence. Chloe's golden eyes blazed with fury. She spoke in her own language, loud and clear. We do not surrender our people to monsters. If you want him, you go through us. Bruce laughed, a sound without humor. You have spears and bows. We have plasma rifles and gunships. This is not a negotiation. This is an inevitability. Elisina stepped forward. She was small, barely reaching the knees of the soldiers, but her voice carried across the square. She spoke in halting English, words Gideon had taught her during their lessons. You are bad man. You hurt Gideon. Gideon is good. Gideon is family. We do not give family to bad men. Bruce looked down at her with disdain. A child and a beast. How touching. He gestured to his soldiers. Take Anders. Kill anyone who interferes. The soldiers raised their weapons. The villagers tensed, preparing for a fight they could not win. Gideon opened his mouth to surrender, to stop the slaughter before it began. Elisina's arm moved in a blur. Her slingshot sang, and a stone flew faster than thought. It struck General Bruce squarely in the center of his forehead, and the general staggered back. Blood streaming from a cut that would scar. The soldiers froze, shocked that someone had attacked their commander. Bruce touched his forehead, stared at the blood on his fingers, and his face twisted with rage. But Gideon was laughing. He laughed loud and wild, the sound echoing across the square. "Oh, General," he called out, "you should not have threatened my family." His voice dropped, became cold and hard. I have spent 6 months on this world, learning, adapting, preparing. Did you think I was idle? Did you think I would not plan for this day? What are you talking about? Bruce demanded. There is a communications relay in the crashed hauler, Gideon said. Old technology, barely functional, but good enough to send a narrowband signal. I have been transmitting every day for 6 months. Documents, recordings, evidence of every crime you committed. Names, dates, transactions. Everything I had and more that I reconstructed from memory. By now, the entire Federation has seen it. Every news agency, every official, every citizen. He smiled, and it was not a kind smile. You came here to kill me and hide your crimes, but the crimes are already exposed. You are finished, General. Your career is over. Your life is over. You are just too stupid to realize it yet. Bruce's face went white, then red. You are lying, he said, but his voice wavered. Check your communications, Gideon suggested. See for yourself. One of the soldiers whispered to Bruce, holding out a datapad. The general read it, and Gideon watched as understanding dawned, followed by horror, then rage. Bruce threw the datapad to the ground and drew his sidearm. If I am finished, then so are you. He aimed at Gideon, But before he could fire, Doni moved. The massive Vora covered the distance in 3 bounds, faster than anything that size should move. He did not attack the general. He simply placed himself between Bruce and Gideon, and his growl was a sound from nightmares, deep and resonant and promising violence beyond imagination. The soldiers raised their weapons, targeting Doni, but then the rest of the village moved. Warriors rushed forward, not attacking, but forming a wall of bodies between the Federation troops and their targets. Chloe stood at the front, her knife drawn, her eyes daring anyone to fire. Elisina climbed onto Donnie's back, small and fierce and unafraid. Bruce looked around and saw himself surrounded by aliens who did not fear his weapons, who did not care about his rank, who would die to protect one of their own. He saw his career in ruins, his life destroyed by the man he had tried to bury. He saw that he had lost, not through superior force, but through justice delayed, but finally delivered. "Stand down, General," one of his soldiers said quietly. "It is over. They are broadcasting our position. If we kill civilians, the Federation will court-martial all of us. We need to leave. Now." Bruce's hand shook. For a moment, Gideon thought the general would fire anyway, would kill him even at the cost of his own life. But then Bruce lowered his weapon. "This is not over, Anders," he said, his voice shaking with impotent rage. "I will find a way to destroy you. I will spend every breath hunting you." "You are welcome to try," Gideon said, "but you will do it from a prison cell. I made sure of that." The Federation soldiers retreated to their ships, and Bruce went with them, his back rigid with fury and defeat. The ships lifted off, their engines scorching the earth, and then they were gone, disappearing into the sky and leaving only silence behind. The village erupted in cheers. Warriors clashed weapons against shields. Children shouted with excitement. Elisina slid off Doni's back and ran to Gideon, throwing her arms around him. "We won!" she cried. "We sent the bad man away!" Gideon knelt and hugged her back, his eyes burning with tears he refused to shed. "Yes, little one, we won." Chloe approached, and when Gideon stood, she kissed him again, this time gentle and sweet and full of promise. "You are a dangerous man, Gideon Anders," she said. "You plan, you scheme, you turn the enemy's strength against them. I should have known you were not just a simple pilot." "I am not," Gideon admitted. "I am a survivor. That is all I have ever been." "You are more than that," Chloe said. "You are family. You are home." 2 years passed. The village prospered, and Gideon became one of its most respected hunters. He never forgot the lessons Chloe had taught him, never lost the skills he had learned through pain and persistence. He hunted beside warriors who had once looked at him with suspicion and now called him brother. He taught the children to speak English, preparing them for a galaxy that would inevitably find their world someday. Elisina grew into a remarkable young woman, fierce and kind in equal measure. She hunted with Doni, who had grown even larger, his midnight fur now streaked with silver around his muzzle. She spoke of traveling to the stars one day, of seeing the wonders Gideon described, but she was in no hurry. Home was enough for now. Chloe stood beside Gideon, her hand on her swollen belly. Their child would be born in 3 months, a hybrid of 2 worlds, 2 peoples. The village debated whether the baby would have blue skin or pink, golden eyes or brown, but everyone agreed the child would be loved and protected and raised to be strong. On the anniversary of Gideon's arrival, the village held a feast. They roasted serpent meat and drank fermented juice from purple fruits. They told stories of the sky man who fell from the stars and earned his place through courage and cunning. Children acted out the tale with wooden swords and dramatic flair, making Gideon laugh until his sides hurt. As the twin suns set and the 3 moons rose, Gideon stood on the walls of the village, looking out over the violet forests and rust-colored grass. Chloe joined him, fitting perfectly against his side. Elisina sat on Doni's back nearby, the 2 of them silhouetted against the sky. "Do you ever miss it?" Chloe asked. "The stars. Your old life." "No," Gideon said without hesitation. "That life was a cage. This is freedom, even with all the danger. The serpents, the predators, the hard winters. Especially with the danger," Gideon said. "It makes me feel alive." He turned to face her, taking her hand. "In the tomb, I was dead. I breathed, I existed, but I was not alive. Here, every day is a choice to survive, to fight, to build something worth keeping. He smiled. You gave me that. Elisina gave me that. This world gave me that. We did not give you anything, Chloe said. You earned it yourself. Then I am grateful I crashed on this planet and not another, Gideon said. I am grateful a little girl with pink hair decided not to let her Vora eat me. I am grateful you decided I was worth the trouble of teaching. He kissed her forehead gently. I am home. Elisina climbed down from Doni and walked over to them. The moonlight turned her blue skin silver, and her golden eyes reflected the stars. You know, she said thoughtfully, I used to think it was strange that Doni did not eat you. I asked you if you were poisonous. She grinned. Now I know why. He saw what you would become. He saw that you belonged to us before we knew it ourselves. Voras always know. Smart creature, Gideon said, reaching out to scratch Doni's massive head. The Vora rumbled with contentment, and his tail, thick as a tree trunk, thumped against the ground. The best puppy in the galaxy, Elisina declared, even if he does eat people sometimes. Only bad people, Gideon reminded her. Mostly bad people, Elisina corrected with a laugh. They stood together on the walls, family by choice rather than blood, watching the moons paint the landscape in silver light. Somewhere in the galaxy, General Bruce rotted in a Federation prison, his crimes finally exposed, his power broken. Somewhere beyond the stars, ships sailed between worlds, carrying commerce and conflict and the endless churn of civilization. But here on Vela 7, under twin suns and 3 moons, Gideon had found something he thought he had lost forever in the tomb, a reason to wake up each morning, a purpose, a home. Elisina took his hand on one side, Chloe took it on the other, and Doni pressed against his back. They were an unlikely family, a human fugitive, a blue-skinned warrior, a wild child with a Vora companion, and a baby yet to be born. But they were a family nonetheless, bound by loyalty and love and the shared experience of survival against impossible odds. Gideon looked up at the stars, those distant points of light that had once been his entire world, and he smiled. He did not regret his past. It had brought him here. He did not fear his future. He would face it with the people who mattered most. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. You are thinking loud thoughts, Chloe observed. Share them. I was thinking, Gideon said, that I am the luckiest man in the galaxy. I escaped a prison. I survived a crash. I was not eaten by a Vora. I found a family who accepted me despite every reason not to. He squeezed her hand. I am thinking that sometimes the best things in life come from falling, not flying. You have become a poet, Chloe teased. Next you will start writing songs. Absolutely not, Gideon said firmly. I will leave the singing to Elisina. She is much better at it. That is true, Elisina said without modesty. My voice is beautiful. She demonstrated by singing a hunting song, her clear voice carrying across the village. Doni howled along, a deep bass note that harmonized perfectly with her soprano. Chloe laughed, a sound Gideon still treasured every time he heard it. She laughed so rarely, this warrior woman who had been hurt and hardened by loss. But when she did, it was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. You have destroyed our fierce reputation, she told Gideon. Now people will say we are soft, keeping a sky man and letting children sing with Voras. Let them talk, Gideon said. We know the truth. And what truth is that? That we are exactly as soft and as fierce as we need to be, Gideon said. That we protect our own with everything we have. That anyone who threatens our family will learn why Voras are the most dangerous predators on this world. He looked at Doni, who watched him with those knowing amber eyes. Not because of their teeth or their claws, but because of their loyalty. You have learned our ways well, Chloe said softly. Too well, perhaps. You are more one of us now than some who were born here. Good, Gideon said, because I have no intention of being anything else. They stayed on the walls until the moons reached their zenith, talking of small things and future plans. They spoke of names for the coming baby, of improving the village's defenses, of teaching Elisina advanced mathematics and stellar navigation. They spoke of the ordinary concerns of ordinary people living ordinary lives, and Gideon realized that was exactly what he had been seeking all along. normalcy, family, a place where he mattered not because of what he could do, but simply because of who he was. As they finally descended from the walls and walked back to their home, Elisina skipping ahead with Doni padding beside her, Gideon allowed himself one last look at the stars. They were beautiful, distant, and cold and eternal, but they were no longer his destination. He had found his place, not among the stars but beneath them, on a world of violet forests and rust-colored grass, with people who had blue skin and golden eyes and hearts big enough to welcome a stranger who fell from the sky. The door to their home closed behind them, shutting out the night. Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm light on walls hung with weapons and memories. Elisina curled up with Doni on a pile of furs, already half asleep, her hand resting on the Vora's massive head. Chloe moved about the house, checking doors and windows with the automatic caution of a warrior, before finally settling beside Gideon on their bed. "Sleep well, Sky Man," she whispered. "Tomorrow we hunt." "Tomorrow we hunt," Gideon agreed. "And the day after that, and the day after that, for as long as we live." "Which will be a very long time," Chloe said firmly, "because we are survivors, all of us. We do not give up. We do not surrender. We endure." "Yes," Gideon said, his eyes closing. "We endure." And in the darkness of their home, surrounded by the family he had never expected to find, Gideon slept without nightmares for the first time in his life. He had been prisoner number 7. He had been a fugitive, a criminal, a man without a home or a future. But now he was simply Gideon, husband to Chloe, father to Elisina in all the ways that mattered, and friend to a Vora named Doni, who had decided, for reasons known only to Voris, that this particular human was worth keeping alive. The twin suns would rise again tomorrow, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. The village would wake, and people would go about their lives, hunting, trading, teaching, living. Elisina would practice with her bow, while Doni watched with patient eyes. Chloe would plan the day's hunt with the other warriors, and Gideon would be there, part of it all, no longer falling, but firmly planted on solid ground. He had escaped the tomb. He had survived the crash. He had earned his place in a world that had no reason to welcome him. He had defeated his enemy not through violence, but through patience and truth. He had found love, found family, found purpose. He had found home. And that, Gideon thought as sleep finally claimed him, was worth every moment of pain, every year of suffering, every night in the darkness. Because the fall, no matter how far or how hard, had brought him exactly where he needed to be. 3 months later, Chloe's screams tore through the night. Gideon held her hand while the village healers worked, their blue hands steady and sure. Elisina paced outside with Doni, both of them radiating nervous energy. The labor lasted through the night and into the dawn, and when the first sun touched the horizon, a new voice joined the world. The baby was small, wrinkled, and absolutely perfect. Her skin was pale blue, lighter than her mother's, and her eyes, when they opened, were brown like Gideon's, but flecked with gold. "We will name her Lyra," Chloe said, exhausted but smiling. "After the constellation you showed me." Elisina burst into the room before anyone could stop her, Doni's massive head poking through the doorway behind her. She stared at the tiny bundle in Chloe's arms with wide eyes. "She is so small," Elisina whispered. "Will she break?" "No," Gideon said, laughing. "Babies are tougher than they look." "You were this small once." "Impossible," Elisina declared. "I was born knowing how to hunt." She peered closer at her new sister. "Can I hold her?" Chloe carefully transferred the baby to Elisina's arms, showing her how to support the head. Elisina sat very still, her usual wild energy completely focused on the fragile life she held. "Hello, Lyra," she said softly. "I am your sister. I will teach you everything. How to track, how to shoot, how to make Doni carry you when your legs are tired." She looked up at Gideon and Chloe. "She will be the best hunter in the village. I will make sure of it." "Let her learn to walk first," Chloe said, but her eyes were soft with affection. The village celebrated the birth with a feast that lasted 3 days. Hunters brought their finest kills, and the elders blessed Lyra with water from the sacred stream. Doni, who had been wary of the infant at first, quickly became her fiercest protector. He would lie beside her cradle for hours, one massive paw raised as if ready to crush anything that threatened her. The other children in the village, seeing this, decided that Lyra must be very special indeed if even Avora recognized her importance. Gideon found himself changed by fatherhood. He had been a father figure to Elisina, but this was different. This was a life he had helped create, a bridge between two worlds, and the responsibility of it terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. He spent long nights watching Lyra sleep, marveling at the tiny fingers that gripped his thumb with surprising strength, wondering what kind of person she would become. Elisina took her role as older sister with fierce dedication. She appointed herself as Lyra's guardian and educator, much to the amusement of the adults. When Lyra cried, Elisina would sing to her in both languages, blending earth lullabies Gideon had taught her with traditional songs of Vela 7. When Lyra slept, Elisina would sit beside her cradle and tell her stories of great hunts and brave warriors, as if the infant could understand every word. The seasons turned. Lyra grew from infant to toddler, her first steps celebrated by the entire village. She had her mother's strength and her father's curiosity, a combination that led her into constant mischief. She would wander away if not watched, drawn to anything shiny or moving. More than once, Doni had to carry her back by the scruff of her tunic, the massive Vora, surprisingly gentle with his small charge. Elisina, now 11 years old, had become one of the village's most skilled hunters. She moved through the forest like a shadow, her bond with Doni allowing them to hunt as a single unit. Other young hunters who had once mocked her for being different now sought her advice and respected her skills. She wore this respect casually, as if it had always been her due, but Gideon saw the pride in her eyes. The peace they had found was not to last. It never did on Vela 7, where the land itself was as much a challenge as any enemy. The warning came on a quiet morning when the twin suns rose blood red instead of their usual gold. The elders gathered in the village square, their faces grave. Gideon joined Chloe and the other warriors, sensing the tension in the air. "The crimson dawn," one of the elders said, his voice carrying across the square. "It has been 30 years since the last one." The old hunter's eyes swept the crowd. "The serpents will migrate, thousands of them, driven from the deep forests by instinct. They will pass through our valley in 3 days." The crowd erupted in worried murmurs. Gideon had killed one serpent, and it had nearly killed him. The thought of thousands of them passing through the valley made his blood run cold. "What do we do?" he asked. "We have two choices," Chloe said, her voice cutting through the noise. "We evacuate to the high caves and wait for the migration to pass, or we make a stand and defend our homes. The high caves can shelter the village for a week, maybe 2, another warrior said, but if the serpents damage our homes, we will return to ruins. Our food stores, our weapons, everything we have built." "And if we fight?" Gideon asked. "We will lose people," Chloe said bluntly. "Serpents are relentless. They do not fear death. They do not retreat. We would need to create barriers, funnel them through kill zones, use every advantage we have. Even then, some will get through." The council debated for hours. Some argued for evacuation, prioritizing safety over property. Others insisted on defending their homes, unwilling to abandon what they had built. Gideon listened to both sides, his mind working through tactical problems he had not considered since his days as a pilot. Finally, he stood. "What if we do both?" he said. The crowd turned to him. "We send the children, the elderly, and those who cannot fight to the high caves with enough provisions and guards to keep them safe. The rest of us stay and defend the village. We are not trying to kill every serpent. We are trying to redirect them, to make our village an obstacle they would rather go around than through." "How do we do that?" a hunter asked. "Fire," Gideon said. "Serpents hate fire. I have seen how they react to torches during night hunts. We create walls of fire on either side of the village, forcing them to go around. We dig pits and fill them with sharpened stakes. We make noise, constant noise, because serpents hunt by sound and vibration. We make the village seem like more trouble than it is worth." Chloe studied him, her golden eyes thoughtful. "It could work," she said slowly, "but it would take all of us working without rest. We have 3 days to prepare." "Then we start now," Gideon said. The village transformed into organized chaos. Every able-bodied person had a task. Some dug trenches on either side of the village, deep channels that would be filled with oil and set ablaze. Others sharpened stakes and planted them in pits disguised with thin layers of earth and grass. The blacksmiths worked day and night, creating additional spear points and arrowheads. The weavers made nets from the strongest fibers, nets that could tangle serpent legs and slow them down. Gideon worked alongside everyone else, his body remembering the exhaustion of manual labor. He dug trenches until his hands bled, carried stakes until his shoulders screamed, and helped construct barriers of sharpened logs. Chloe worked beside him, never complaining, never resting, her face set in grim determination. Elisina refused to go to the caves. "I am a hunter," she declared. "I fight with the village. Lyra needs me here." "You are 11 years old," Chloe said firmly. "Your place is protecting your sister, not fighting serpents." "I am old enough to hunt," Elisina shot back. "I am old enough to kill. Why am I not old enough to defend my home?" The argument raged for an hour before Gideon intervened. "Let her stay," he said quietly. "She is right. She is a hunter. We need every skilled fighter we have. And Doni will not leave her side, which means we have a Vora fighting for us." Chloe looked like she wanted to argue, but she finally nodded. "You stay with me during the battle," she told Elisina. "You follow my orders. If I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" "Understood," Elisina said, though her eyes suggested she had no intention of running from anything. On the evening before the migration, the villagers who would defend their home gathered in the square. 60 warriors armed with spears and bows and knives, facing a threat that numbered in the thousands. The children and elderly had already left for the caves, carried on improvised stretchers or riding on the backs of the few domesticated beasts the village kept. Lyra had gone with them, crying for her father and sister, but safe. Chloe stood before the warriors and spoke. "Tomorrow we face something our ancestors faced," she said. "The Crimson Migration. Some of us will die. That is the truth, and I will not lie to you with false hope. But those who survive will have earned something precious, the knowledge that they stood their ground when it mattered, that they protected their homes and their people, that they did not run." She drew her knife and held it high. "We are the people of Vela 7. We are hunters and warriors. We do not flee from beasts. We teach them to fear us. Tomorrow we remind the serpents why they should avoid our valley." The warriors roared, a sound of defiance and determination that echoed off the violet forest. Gideon felt the sound in his chest, felt it burn away his fear and replace it with something harder, something colder. He had fought in the darkness of the tomb for 3 years. He had survived a crash that should have killed him. He had earned his place in this village through blood and pain. He would not lose it to mindless beasts. That night he lay beside Chloe, neither of them able to sleep. They talked quietly, making plans for after the battle, as if speaking the words would make them true. They talked about Lyra's future, about teaching Elisina advanced tactics, about expanding the village's walls. They talked about everything except the possibility that one or both of them might not survive the next day. As dawn approached, Gideon rose and armed himself. He took 2 spears, his longest and strongest, and a knife that Chloe had given him on their wedding day. He tied back his hair and checked his boots, making sure he could move freely. Around him, other warriors prepared in similar silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The first serpent appeared as the first sun broke the horizon. It came from the deep forest, moving with the fluid grace of a predator that had never known fear. Behind it came another, and then the trees were full of them. Serpents of every size, from juveniles barely longer than a man to ancient beasts that dwarfed Doni. They moved as a river of scales and teeth, driven by instinct older than memory. "Light the fires," Chloe commanded. Torches touched the oil-filled trenches, and walls of flame erupted on either side of the village. The serpents recoiled from the heat, hissing their displeasure. The migration slowed, compressed, as the creatures sought a path that did not involve crossing the flames. Some tried anyway and died screaming, their scales no protection against sustained heat. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. But the serpents were many, and fire alone would not stop them all. Some found gaps in the flames. Others leaped over the trenches, their powerful legs carrying them across the barriers. These met the warriors and the battle began in earnest. Gideon's world narrowed to the serpent in front of him. Thrust, dodge, strike. His spear found scales and flesh. Black blood splattered his arms and face. A serpent lunged at him, jaws wide, and he rammed his spear down its throat, feeling the point scrape bone. He tore the weapon free and pivoted to face the next threat. Beside him, Chloe moved like a dancer, her knife and spear working in perfect harmony. She targeted eyes and joints, the weak points in a serpent's armor. Her face was set in concentration, beautiful and terrible at once. A serpent caught her across the ribs with its claws, drawing blood, but she did not slow. She drove her spear through its skull and moved to the next. Elisina fought with Doni at her side, the two of them a terrifying combination. The girl would shoot arrows into serpent eyes, blinding them, and Doni would tear them apart with claws and teeth. She moved with a grace beyond her years, rolling under strikes and coming up with her knife ready. When a serpent cornered her against a building, she did not panic. She climbed onto Doni's back, and the massive Vora launched himself at the creature, bearing it to the ground in a tangle of fur and scales. The battle raged for hours. Warriors fell, dragged down by multiple serpents or caught by unlucky strikes. But for every warrior that fell, 10 serpents died. The bodies piled up, creating obstacles that forced the migration to flow around the village rather than through it. The fires burned lower as the oil was consumed, but by then the main body of the migration had passed. Gideon found himself fighting back to back with a warrior named Bruno, a stocky man with arms like tree trunks. They held a narrow alley, preventing serpents from flanking the main defensive line. Bruno fought with an axe, each swing crushing scales and bone. Together, they created a barrier of dead serpents that nothing living could easily cross. Then Bruno slipped in a pool of blood. He went down hard, his axe skittering away, and a serpent was on him instantly. Gideon reacted without thought. He dropped his spear, grabbed the serpent by its neck with both hands, and twisted with all his strength. The creature thrashed, its claws raking his arms, but he held on. He felt bones crack beneath his grip, felt the serpent go limp, and threw the corpse aside. Bruno stared at him with wide eyes. "You are stronger than you look, Sky Man." "Desperation gives strength," Gideon panted, helping the warrior to his feet. The battle finally ended as the last sun reached its zenith. The remaining serpents, finding the village too much trouble, flowed around it and continued their migration. The warriors who remained standing numbered 43. 20 had fallen, their bodies already being collected by those too injured to fight further. Gideon collapsed against a wall, his body screaming with exhaustion and pain. He was covered in blood, most of it not his own, and his arms bore deep scratches from serpent claws. Chloe found him there, her own face streaked with blood and sweat. She said nothing, simply sat beside him and leaned her head on his shoulder. "We survived," she said finally. "Some of us," Gideon replied, looking at the bodies being carried through the square. "More than would have survived without your plan," Chloe said. "You saved lives today, Gideon. Never forget that." Elisina approached with Doni, both of them exhausted but unharmed. "I killed 7, she announced proudly. Doni killed 15. We counted." "You did well, little warrior," Chloe said. "Very well. Can we eat now?" Elisina asked. "I am very hungry." Despite everything, Gideon laughed. "Yes," he said. "We can eat now." The village spent the following week recovering. The wounded were tended, the dead were honored, and the damage was repaired. The serpent corpses were burned in a massive pyre that could be seen for kilometers, a pillar of smoke that marked their victory. When the children and elderly returned from the caves, they found their homes standing, battered but intact. Lyra ran to Gideon with a squeal of joy, her small arms wrapping around his legs. He picked her up, holding her close, and felt the last of his battle tension drain away. This was what he had fought for. This tiny life, this family, this home. Elisina became something of a hero among the young hunters. Her kill count, verified by multiple witnesses, had exceeded that of warriors twice her age. She wore this fame with casual confidence, though Gideon noticed she sometimes woke from nightmares, just like he did. They would sit together on those nights, neither speaking, both understanding that some experiences left marks that no amount of time could fully erase. The seasons changed again. Lyra grew into a talkative toddler who asked endless questions and climbed everything she could reach. Gideon found himself exhausted in entirely new ways, chasing after a child who feared nothing and had inherited both her mother's athleticism and her father's curiosity. More than once, he found her trying to climb onto Donnie's back, the patient Vora standing still while the tiny girl used his fur as handholds. One afternoon, while Gideon was teaching Lyra the names of plants, scouts returned to the village with troubling news. There was a camp in the northern forest, they reported. Strangers with machines and weapons, unlike anything we have seen. They are cutting down trees and building structures. Gideon felt his blood run cold. How many, he asked. Perhaps 20, the scout said. They wear uniforms. They do not look like they plan to leave. Chloe met Gideon's eyes across the village square. Could they be looking for you, she asked. Gideon shook his head slowly. Bruce is in prison. The Federation wrote off this planet as uncharted. No one should be here. He paused. Unless someone else found my crash site, unless someone tracked the communications relay. We should investigate, Chloe said. Learn who they are and what they want. I will go with you, Elisina said immediately. No, Chloe and Gideon said in unison. You always say no, Elisina protested. I am not a child anymore. I am a warrior. I fought serpents. You are 12 years old, Chloe said. This is different. These are not beasts. These are people with weapons that can kill from a distance. So I will keep my distance, Elisina argued. And I have Doni. Together we can scout better than anyone. She had a point, though Gideon hated to admit it. The bond between Elisina and Doni made them an exceptional scouting team. The Vora's senses combined with Elisina's intelligence and stealth created an advantage no other scout could match. Fine, Chloe said finally, but you stay with us. No heroics, no risks. You observe and report. Nothing more. I promise, Elisina said, though her eyes sparkled with excitement. They set out the next morning, a small team of 5 scouts including Gideon, Chloe, Elisina, and 2 experienced hunters named Colin and Dougal. Doni padded silently alongside them, his massive bulk moving through the forest without sound. They traveled north for 2 days, moving carefully, avoiding trails that might give away their approach. The camp revealed itself through the sound of machinery. Gideon heard the whine of power tools and the crash of falling trees long before he saw the structures. The team crept to a ridge overlooking the site and observed from cover. The camp was larger than the scout had reported. At least 30 people worked there, not 20. They wore uniforms that Gideon did not recognize, gray with red markings. Their equipment was modern, powered by portable generators. They had built several prefabricated structures and were in the process of erecting more. What are they doing? Chloe whispered. Gideon watched the activity with growing concern. They are establishing a permanent base, he said. This is not a research station. This is military. Why would military come here? Colin asked. This world has nothing of value to star people. Gideon's eyes found a particular structure, one surrounded by guards. That building is different, he said. Heavier guards, reinforced walls. They are protecting something. We should go back, Dougal said nervously. Tell the village. Prepare. Wait, Elisina said suddenly. Look there. She pointed to a clearing where several people stood around a large piece of equipment. Gideon's breath caught as he recognized it. A scanner, the same type used to detect technology and biological signatures. They were scanning the forest, and if he understood their sweep pattern, they were searching for something specific. They are looking for my crash site, Gideon said quietly. Or for me, or both. Then we need to leave, Chloe said. Now, before they detect us. But as they began to withdraw, Doni's ears pricked forward. The massive Vora's lips pulled back in a silent snarl, his body tensing. Someone is behind us, Elisina whispered urgently. Gideon turned slowly and found himself staring at 3 soldiers, their weapons raised. The soldiers looked as surprised as Gideon's team, but their training took over quickly. On the ground, one of them ordered in a language Gideon understood, but the villagers did not. All of you, now. There was a moment of frozen tension, then everything happened at once. Doni roared and charged. The soldiers fired their weapons, projectile guns that cracked like thunder. Elisina dove for cover, her bow already in hand. Chloe threw her knife with deadly precision, catching one soldier in the throat. Gideon and the other hunters rushed forward with spears. Doni reached the soldiers first, his massive paws smashing one man to the ground before the others could react. But the gunfire had alerted the camp. Shouts echoed through the forest, and more soldiers came running. There were too many, and they had weapons that outranged spears and arrows. "Run," Gideon commanded. "Back to the village. Warn them." He grabbed a fallen soldier's gun, the weapon feeling alien in his hands after so long with primitive arms. "I will slow them down." "We do not leave people behind," Chloe said fiercely. "You have to," Gideon said. "For Lyra, for the village. They need to know." He met her eyes. "I will be right behind you, I promise." Chloe hesitated for only a heartbeat before nodding. She grabbed Elisina's arm and pulled her away. Colin and Dougal followed, and Doni reluctantly left Gideon's side at Elisina's command. Gideon watched them disappear into the forest before turning to face the approaching soldiers. He knew he could not hold them for long, but he could delay them, create confusion, buy his family time to reach the village. He set his back against a tree and opened fire, the unfamiliar weapon bucking in his hands. Soldiers dove for cover, their advance halting. Gideon kept firing until the weapon ran dry, then grabbed his spear and ran. He led them on a chase through the violet forest, using every trick Chloe had taught him. He climbed trees and dropped on soldiers from above. He set traps with bent branches and hidden pits. He wounded where he could and disappeared before they could coordinate a response. But he was one man against 30, and eventually they cornered him against a river too wide to jump. Gideon stood with his back to the rushing water, his spear in hand, ready for the end. The soldiers surrounded him in a half circle, their weapons trained on his center mass. Then their commander pushed through the ranks, and Gideon's blood turned to ice. It was not Bruce. This man was younger, harder, with eyes like chips of flint. He studied Gideon with cold interest. "Gideon Anders," the commander said, "we have been looking for you for a long time. You have caused considerable trouble." He gestured to his soldiers. "Take him alive. He has information we need." Gideon knew he had no chance against so many, but he also knew that if they captured him, they would torture him for information about the village, about the relay, about everything. He could not allow that. He raised his spear, preparing to fight until they had no choice but to kill him. Then an arrow took the commander in the shoulder. The man screamed and fell. More arrows followed, raining down from the trees. Soldiers scattered, seeking cover, as shapes dropped from the canopy. The village's hunters had come, all 43 who could still fight, led by Chloe and a furious Elisina. The battle was brief and brutal. The soldiers had superior weapons, but the hunters knew the forest. They used the trees as shields, struck from unexpected angles, and worked with a coordination born of years hunting together. When Doni burst from the undergrowth and killed 3 soldiers in as many seconds, the rest broke and ran back to their camp. Gideon stood in the aftermath, his body shaking with adrenaline and relief. Chloe reached him first, her hand gripping his arm hard enough to bruise. "You promised you would follow," she said, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "You promised." "I did follow," Gideon said. Eventually, she hit him hard on the shoulder, then pulled him into a fierce hug. "Do not do that again," she whispered. "Do not make me choose between you and the village. I cannot lose you." "You will not lose me," Gideon said. "Not to them, not to anyone." Elisina appeared beside them, her face pale but determined. "They will send more," she said. "The camp is too large. We hurt them, but we did not destroy them." She was right. The villagers had won this skirmish, but the war was just beginning. They retrieved what weapons they could from the fallen soldiers and retreated into the forest, leaving no trail. The village had to prepare, and they had to do it quickly. The council met that night, and the debate was intense. Some argued for immediate evacuation, for leaving Vela 7 entirely, and finding a new home in the unexplored wilds. Others wanted to launch a preemptive strike against the camp, to destroy it before the strangers could call for reinforcements. Gideon listened to both sides before speaking. They came here for a reason, he said. They are searching for something, and I believe that something is me. More specifically, they want the communications relay I used to expose Bruce. If that technology falls into the wrong hands, they could use it to track other fugitives, other whistleblowers. He met the eyes of the council. I brought this danger to your village. I should be the one to end it. You speak of ending it how? An elder asked. I go to the camp, Gideon said. I surrender myself. And while they are focused on me, a strike team destroys their base and everyone in it. No survivors, no witnesses, no way for them to call for help. That is suicide, Chloe said flatly. Maybe, Gideon admitted, but it is also the best chance we have. They want me alive. That means they will not kill me immediately. That gives the strike team time to position themselves. He looked at Chloe. You know it is the right move. I know it is a terrible move that might work, Chloe corrected. There is a difference. The council debated through the night. Elisina argued passionately against the plan, her voice cracking with emotion. You cannot sacrifice yourself, she told Gideon. You promised me you would never leave. You promised. I promised I would stay as long as I could, Gideon reminded her gently. But some promises can only be kept by breaking others. I promised to protect this village, to protect you and Lyra and your mother. This is how I keep that promise. In the end, the council approved the plan with the provision that Gideon would wear a hidden knife and that the strike team would move the moment he gave the signal. Gideon spent the following day with his family, memorizing every moment. He played with Lyra until she laughed herself breathless. He sparred with Elisina, letting her win more often than he should. He held Chloe in the darkness and promised her things he was not sure he could deliver. At dawn, he walked toward the camp alone, his hands raised in surrender. Soldiers met him at the perimeter, weapons ready. He spoke in their language, identifying himself and offering to cooperate. They bound his hands and led him into the camp, and Gideon noted every detail. Guard positions, weapon placements, the location of the generators that powered their equipment. The commander, his shoulder bandaged, met him in the central structure. Welcome back, Anders, the man said. You have made this very difficult. Sit. We have much to discuss. Gideon sat, his mind counting seconds. The strike team would need at least an hour to position themselves around the camp. He needed to buy them that time. Who sent you? He asked. What do you want? The commander smiled coldly. We represent certain interests that were inconvenienced by your actions against General Bruce. Interests that would prefer certain technologies remain secret. You used an old military relay to transmit classified information? We want that relay. We want the codes you used. And we want to know who helped you. I worked alone, Gideon said. The relay was jury-rigged from parts of my crashed ship. The codes were standard military encryption that I had not forgotten. He met the commander's eyes. There is no conspiracy, just one man who refused to let corruption stand. We will see, the commander said. We have ways of verifying your story. Painful ways. He gestured to soldiers who dragged Gideon to another room. The interrogation began, and Gideon gritted his teeth through it, counting minutes, waiting for the signal. Then he heard it, a distant explosion, followed by gunfire. The strike team had attacked. Chaos erupted in the camp. Soldiers ran in all directions, trying to organize a defense. Gideon used the distraction to work his hands free of the bindings, took the hidden knife Chloe had given him, and stabbed the nearest guard. He took the fallen man's gun and fought his way out of the structure. Outside, the camp was burning. The generators had been sabotaged, and fires spread from building to building. The villagers attacked from every direction, using the cover of smoke and confusion. Gideon saw Chloe leading a group of hunters, her spear red with blood. He saw Elisina and Doni cutting off a retreat path. He saw Colin and Dougal setting charges on the communications equipment. The commander tried to organize a defense, but it was too late. The villagers had learned from fighting serpents. Overwhelm the enemy quickly, give them no time to adapt. Within minutes, the battle was over. The few soldiers who survived threw down their weapons and begged for mercy. No mercy, Chloe said coldly. They came to take our home. She looked at Gideon. What do we do with them? We cannot let them leave, Gideon said quietly. If they report back, more will come. Stronger forces. We cannot fight an entire fleet. Chloe understood. She gave orders in her own language, and the hunters moved efficiently. It was brutal and necessary, and Gideon forced himself to watch, to accept his responsibility for what had to be done. When it was over, the camp and everyone in it ceased to exist. The villagers salvaged what technology they could use, destroyed the rest, and erased all evidence that the camp had ever been there. They returned to the village at sunset, victorious but somber. 20 warriors had gone out. 18 came back. The village mourned its dead and celebrated its survival in equal measure. Gideon found Lyra waiting for him, and he swept her into his arms, holding her tight. "You came back," Elisina said, relief plain in her voice. "You kept your promise." "This time," Gideon said, "but there will be a next time. There is always a next time on Vela 7. Then we will survive that too," Chloe said firmly, "together." And they did. The seasons turned and the village grew stronger. They used the salvage technology carefully, preserving it for emergencies but not becoming dependent on it. Lyra grew from toddler to child, learning to hunt under Elisina's watchful eye. Elisina grew into a young woman, fierce and capable, her bond with Doni as strong as ever. Chloe and Gideon led the village through challenges and celebrations, their partnership deepening with every shared trial. Years later, when traders from another part of Vela 7 visited the village, they brought news that the Earth Federation had collapsed in a series of scandals and civil conflicts. General Bruce had died in prison, murdered by someone he had wronged. The galaxy had changed, and the tomb no longer existed. Gideon was free in ways he had never imagined possible, his past finally buried where it belonged. He stood on the walls of the village one evening, watching Lyra practice with a bow, while Elisina coached her technique. Doni lay nearby, older now and moving slower, but his amber eyes were still alert. Chloe joined him, her hand finding his. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The stars, the life you left behind." Gideon looked out over the valley, at the violet forests and rust-colored grass, at the village that had become his home. He thought of the tomb, of General Bruce, of the man he had been before he fell from the sky. "No," he said, "I do not miss any of it. This is where I belong." "Good," Chloe said, "because we are not letting you go." And Gideon laughed, the sound echoing across the valley, free and genuine and full of life. He had fallen from the stars, been saved by a child and her monster, and found a family in the most unlikely place. He had fought for this home, bled for it, and he would defend it until his last breath. The twin suns set, painting the sky in familiar shades of gold and orange. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new joys. But tonight, surrounded by family and standing on solid ground, Gideon was content.